Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel. Today, we are going to talk about probably the best show I've watched, I don't know, this year. I've loved the show. I think really highly of the show. Pretty stoked to have an opportunity to talk about it and tell more people to watch it so we can get a second season, hopefully. This was a HBO Max original that Netflix has since picked up. I caught it on Netflix when it arrived. We're going to talk about Scavenger's Reign. And because I'm trying to do this YouTube thing correctly, we're going to go check out the intro, the main theme for the show, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Maybe, if I can figure it out. So, I wanted to show the intro just because I think oh, hang on. I got noise going in my headphones. Um, I'm still figuring out how to stream properly. I wanted to show the intro for Scavenger's Reign because it's kind of like this beautiful show. It's really good sci-fi. So if you like sci-fi, absolutely stop watching my video. I appreciate the clicks and the people visiting, but like go watch the show. Uh the mood of it is very alien and kind of off-putting. So I wanted to have that intro showing just because the theme, the soundtrack for it is really ominous. The show feels very alien. The color palette's kind of weird. The planet they're on is beautiful and kind of terrible. And so the theme really shows like, hey, there's a shipwreck and the people on the planet are fighting to survive, but there's this ominous undertone in that main theme that's playing. Nicholas Snyder is the guy who did the soundtrack. It was the composer for the original music in the show. The show has a great voice acting cast. Shout out to Alia Shawkat, who's Arrested Development alum. Arrested Development's one of my favorite shows of all time. She played Maybe in the show. She's a couple different voices in this show. She's Levi, the robot, and then an engineer in the show as well. So really good cast. The voice acting's great. The animation is great. But the show itself has one of the best villains of all time. I don't want to spoil too much. I truly want you to go watch the show. Sometimes when I'm doing YouTube stuff, I just want to talk about a psychological concept. But like, I really, really, really liked this show. I think more people should watch it so that Netflix is like, yes, we'll do a second season, which is an uphill battle because Netflix just loves to cancel shows instead of ever committing to anything. Netflix has some commitment problems. Let's be honest. Should do a whole episode on that or a whole video on that. So Scavenger's Reign is really about a crew of space people, adventurers, explorers. We're not really sure what their role is. They were on a cargo ship, so moving about the galaxy. Their ship has a crash landing, and we're kind of given like, here are the survivors of the show. So we have Ozzy and Levi. Ozzy worked in like the storage area. She was kind of like not like a maintenance person, but like a bureaucrat's the wrong word too. But she wasn't like a pilot. She wasn't like a major explorer or a scientist. She just kind of kept the storage in order and was like in charge of stuff, like in the supply chain kind of thing. And she is with Levi, who is a robot. Levi has a really good character development as the show goes on. Ozzy and Levi are one group. We have Cayman, who was an engineer, or I don't know, he didn't get along with the ship's captain. He's sort of a bad guy. He's kind of a bad guy, but you end up feeling really bad for him throughout the show. And then you have Sam and Ursula. One of the things that I liked about the show that I think the show did really well that other sci-fi does poorly is we don't get a ton of backstory on any of these characters. We get some on Ozzy and a little bit on Cayman, but like otherwise, the show's just kind of like they've crash landed. Here's their story. It doesn't go back to the Demeter, which is the ship they were on. It doesn't go back to like a ton of stuff that was going on, except for Cayman. But it's not to move the plot along. It's because like that's what's happening to Cayman in real time, which we'll get into after I say spoiler alert. We're not there yet. Um, and so the show's not spending a ton of time on like relationship building. Show's not trying to be real like manipulative of your emotions. A lot of shows will have here's the character you should like. We're going to make them likable by showing these clips from previous in their life. The show doesn't do that. The characters are just kind of there. And they don't get a ton of like they get some, but not a lot. It's not like there's no character development, but it's really only makes sense in we've crash landed moving forward, and that's what we get. So I think the show did a really good job of that. I sometimes, as a therapist, as a mental health professional, roll my eyes at like too much of the ham fisted, over the top, really hitting you over the head with like, you should like this character, and this character is evil. Like, I grew up liking Darth Vader. Like, I've cheered for the villains for a lot of my life, so that doesn't really work for me. Maybe that's because I'm neurodivergent, and so I miss some of the standard social norms. But like I like Joker more than I like Batman. Like growing up, I always gravitated towards some of the bad guys. I thought they were the more interesting characters. And so not in this show, but so I liked that it just kind of let us form our own opinions about characters rather than telling us which ones to like. Um okay, spoiler alert. This is where I don't think I can talk about the show anymore without giving stuff away. Um Levi and Ozzy are kind of like they land in a space where there's some shelter and they have enough equipment where they can kind of make a go of it. So they are building a vegetable garden. They're building stuff. They're doing stuff. They're exploring. They're picking up wreckage. They're doing all this stuff. Um, Levi, who's the robot, is kind of a humanoid figure and gets into like the flora and fauna of the planet and starts to kind of become sentient. Um, and so there's a lot of progress on like Ozzy treating Levi more like human's the wrong word, but like a creature, like giving Levi some autonomy and like some respect. And so Levi's like the cool best character in the show. And so we get to see a lot of progression from like kind of unthinking robot, just do what you're told, what you're programmed to do, into a more fully fledged character who's pretty awesome and like cares about the planet, is in touch with the planet, and does some cool stuff. Levi's cool. Ozzy's cool too. We get to see that growth and development. Ozzy's very focused on like, let's get back to the ship and save the other people who are the survivors. So Ozzy and Levi are kind of doing their thing until they see the ship come out of orbit and crash land on the planet. So everyone kind of got out on escape pods. That's where we have our people who are on the escape pods. Ursula and Sam are working their way towards, we're not really sure, but they're kind of like more adventurous explorers. Sam was one of the pilots, so they have a little bit more knowledge. Ursula is a scientist, so she's got like her journal and she's tracking all the flora and fauna. Ursula and Sam have the best like sci-fi components of the show where it's like they're exploring the planet. We get to see a lot of different cool stuff, and because Ursula is a scientist, she's really meticulous in tracking it. A lot of beautiful artwork, a lot of like I watched some of the show on like TV and some of the show on my phone and like just loved it. It's really easy to get pulled into the planet and experience it. Um, reminded me a little bit of Watchmen in that like weird color palette. So one of the reasons Watchmen, which is generally considered to be the greatest graphic novel of all time, one of the best novels period of all time, has a weird color palette. Like it's pastels, but they're not bright. And so Scavenger's Reign kind of had that vibe too, where it's like this is a weird color palette. It makes it feel very alien, but also some of the things that the plants and the creatures on the planet do are very alien. And so I don't know. I really like that. Sam and Ursula have like a really terrible time with parasite, let's call it. And like it's gross. I would say like the show's not overly violent. Like, my boys who are 6 and 3 sat down for part of it, and there wasn't anything that I was like, "Ooh, they shouldn't watch this." But there's some body horror with the parasite that is in the later arcs of the show. The parasite's kinda gross, and, like, if you have the heebie-jeebies about insects or creepy crawly bug type stuff, the parasite is yucky. Um, but there's some interesting stuff there, and Sam and Ursula have a little bit more of that, like, survival kind of classic sci-fi fighting against the planet, the creatures on the planet who try and kill them, or try and eat them or whatever. And then, when the ship crash lands, they're moving towards it because Sam, again, as a captain, could fly them off the planet. So that's kinda what's going on. Heyman is kind of the bad guy. He's arguably the reason the ship has the escape hatch and crash lands in the first place, because he changes the trajectory of the ship. He doesn't agree with kind of the pilot, who's Sam. They have a bit of a falling out. Cayman crash lands and he interacts with this creature. Apparently, it's named Hollow, but I don't think that comes up in the show at all. I just saw that while I was prepping for the video. Hollow has to be one of the best villains in, like, not like, "Oh, they're a cool villain to like," in like, "What a horrific creature. This is awful. I don't like looking at it. I don't like that it interacts with things. It just does terrible things." Um, so Hollow's the fucking worst, and, like, I really want Hollow to be recognized as one of the worst villains in a show. Hollow is, telepathic, and so, but, like, in a gross way. He has, like, this black, it looks like vomit, but, like, it branches out like a vine, coming out of his mouth, and then Cayman feeds on this stuff, and in this way, Hollow's able to build a telepathic connection with Cayman. So again, like, getting into some of the sci-fi stuff, but Hollow also can manipulate, physical stuff around it. So, takes apart one of the escape pods, um, and just, like, blows a ship up, starts stuff on fire. Like, Hollow's the worst. And one of the, like, flips on the show that I really liked is Hollow starts as, like, this cute little creature, and you're like, "Oh, he's helping, that's so great." And he becomes horrific. He gets huge and gross and nasty looking, and he's just, like, very possessive of Cayman, and, like, he's reading Cayman's mind, but also manipulating Cayman. And so we see a lot of stuff like that. Cayman's not great. Cayman doesn't have a great, like, happy story arc where he, like, learns and grows. He really just goes into kind of like the depression. But you also kind of feel bad for him because you see how Hollow is manipulating Cayman to make him be kind of this sad, depressed little creature. Like, Hollow plays a lot of, like, his former partner, breaking up with him, and, like, a lot of the stuff that Cayman did that wasn't great to his partner that led to that relationship not working, that Cayman still feels really bad about. So Cayman's, like, being emotionally manipulated and abused throughout the show, but also Cayman keeps feeding into it. And I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of show the dynamic of an abusive relationship. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I see a lot of, the abuse cycle in this, where you have something bad happen and the abuse happens, and then you'll have, like, an apology and a honeymoon phase, and then these things will kind of cycle back and forth. So Cayman kind of builds up to, like, not breaking away from Hollow or not wanting any more of his telepathic, like, gross vomit stuff he feeds him, but he keeps going back to it. So he kind of tries to set these boundaries and then just continually fails to kind of fully break away from it until it's totally this codependent, relationship. Not even codependent, like, Cayman just finally, like, gives in to Hollow. And so, yeah, Hollow's the worst. Hollow's abusive, Hollow's manipulative, but, like, Cayman's also a hard character to kinda get behind. And then there's, at one point in the show, and again, I have already said spoiler alert, but, like, this is really giving away the rest of the show if you keep watching here. Um, at one point, Ozzy is able to, get a radio and radio a distress beacon, and so there's a crew of kind of scavengers. I'm guessing this is where the show gets its title from. A three-piece who arrive. Chris and Barry are the main two. There's another one who kind of dies early on, but that's to show us that Chris is terrible and Barry is I'm gonna say coded autistic, but it's not, again, like a clear thing, like it's a diagnosis. When I say coded autistic, I'm gonna say like when you're consuming media, certain characters are coded for like a masculine trope, or they're coded gay, or they're coded queer in some way. They might be coded neurodivergent, but it's never like explicitly said. But the audience is able to kind of project some of these traits onto that character because it kind of fits. So we have Barry, who's likely autistic, and Chris, who's the scavenger, and she is like really kind of heartless and ruthless. But they find Ozzy, and so they kind of take Ozzy, and Ozzy's like, "You're gonna help me rescue the other people in the ship. You're gonna help me rescue the other people in the ship." And like Barry's on board. Chris keeps promising, "Yes, we will do that," but Chris is really just invested in getting the ship's cargo so they can sell it. And so Chris is kind of a bad character too. And so at this point, like all the character arcs start interacting. So Hollow finds the scavenger's ship and destroys it. So then everyone's got to get to the Demeter, which is the main big ship that the is kind of highlighted in the intro scene, the title scene, so that they can try and fly that out. Um, so Barry's trying to help Chris get there. They kind of work with Ozzy. Ozzy's trying to kind of show Barry like Chris doesn't seem all that great. Maybe you shouldn't stick with her. And at one point, Barry does then side with Ozzy to try and help the other people on the Demeter. They're in cryo, they're cryogenically frozen. So Ozzy's trying to save them. Ozzy maybe had a relationship or at least a crush with one of the other crew members who's in cryo. So they're trying to save the other crew members. And then like Chris abandons them and escapes on her own, which sets up like season 2, right? Because there's some flora and fauna that escape with on the ship that Chris uses to escape. It's not the full big ship. It's not the Demeter. But we also have all these other characters then who have arrived at the Demeter around the same time and getting some people out of cryo. So you have potential for new characters. Season 2, how do we survive on the planet still? We know a lot of horrific stuff that's on the planet that's trying to kill us, but we also know some stuff that we can do to like live off the planet. They're in the Demeter, so assumably there's some supplies and stuff. And then you also have Chris, who's gotten off planet but has the flora and fauna that seems to be kind of sentient and aware of what's going on with her. So like I think there's a ton of potential for season 2. It's a beautifully written show. It's beautiful to look at. It's really wonderful to look at. The soundtrack is amazing. The voice acting is really good. So, like, I don't know, watch it so that we can get a season 2. Go put it on in the background if you're not a huge sci-fi person, just so we can get a season 2. Like, hopefully, it does well enough on Netflix that Netflix does a season 2. Um, I did a review earlier of Blue Eye Samurai and talk about like how beautiful it is, and like it doesn't really revolutionize the genre, but it's really good to look at and it's very fun to watch, and said like strong recommend. Show I haven't done a review of yet, but really like, that's on Netflix. It's animated as well as Pluto, which I think is really good sci-fi too. So like Netflix has a really good selection of animated shows. Like some of it's like anime, but a lot of it's just like good art and stuff. So I think it's one of those things where they could add this and have another season to it, and that would be really good. Um, so it's kind of in that list of like shows that I think very highly of. I think it's better than Blue Eye Samurai. I think it's just a better story than Blue Eye Samurai. Blue Eye Samurai's art is better. Um, but this is like a really good show. It's really good sci-fi. It's really good sci-fi in the way that like for someone who likes sci-fi, I think it's hard to find good sci-fi. So like it doesn't fall into too many tropes. It feels alien, and it doesn't like get into that emotional manipulation a lot of shows do. So I really liked it. It's like tense and stressful at certain points, but then it will have these kind of ephemeral, you're traveling on this foreign alien planet, and that feels very like weird and unique. And so it strikes a good balance where it's not all doom and gloom and depressing, but it is uncomfortable. And like I think that's good. It's a very human show without getting into the tropes of like, will they, won't they sleep together? These two people crash landed in a pod. Are they in love now? It doesn't do any of that bullshit. So I really liked it. I thought it was really refreshing. I thought it's a really good job of capturing that fight for survival, some of that human stuff that's involved there, but also a very good feel on like, this feels like an alien planet in a way that a lot of other shows aren't able to. So, Scavenger's Reign, check it out. I strongly recommend it. It's a good watch. I think it's like 8 episodes and they're like 24, 25 minutes each. So you can go move through it pretty quick. I think it's fantastic. I put it up there with like Pluto. I should do a review of Pluto. Pluto's really good. Um, one of the better shows on Netflix, I would say. Just like not just in the animated shows, but all shows. Um, so yeah, Scavenger's Reign. Check it out. Give it a watch. Um, like, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. We appreciate you stopping by and checking out the channel. Like I said, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so I'm a full-time mental health professional. Kind of do this stuff on the side so people can find me and see what I'm like, but also I like to talk about pop culture and mental health. So if there's other shows you would like me to do, or you have thoughts about Scavenger's Reign, drop down in those comments. It helps the algorithm and all that stuff. Thanks for stopping by again, everybody. Take care. Peace.